And what's your pleasure?
From the Thomaston Place Auction Galleries in Thomaston, Maine, I'm Elizabeth McLeod with Auction Waves.
32,500, 100,000 there. Players all over the house. 400,000 on this rare piece, and 600,000, 900,000, 1 million, 1,175 once, 100,175 twice. We all good? Sold.
Everything around us came from somewhere. The material objects of our past can teach us much about our present. But appreciation of these items also has a practical side. A good, solid piece of furniture, even after 200 years, is still a good, solid piece of furniture, while adding the unmistakable flavor of history to your home. This month, Thomaston Place Auction Galleries is proud to present an exclusive one-day auction of one of Maine's most distinguished collections of fine Americana, assembled by the late Farmington auction legends Larry and Jean Dubord. And on this edition of Auction Waves, we'll head on down the road to Wiscasset to discuss the historical context of Americana and American country furniture with noted collector and historian Peter Eaton. But first, a recap of our gallery's biggest auction yet, as we bring you the latest auction news. Well, Summer Grandeur lived up to its name, as for 4 unprecedented days, eager bidders from around the world converged on Thomaston Place Auction Galleries to bid on more than 1,500 extraordinary lots. Auctioneer Kaja Veyu kicked off with a full day of unique and unusual items from the Northeast Harbor, Maine estate of Manhattan socialite Brooke Astor, from furniture to decor items to artwork to personal memorabilia, with bidding running well ahead of projections, and the enthusiasm in the room was palpable, especially as a delicate watercolor by noted botanical artist Rory McEwen reached for the sky.
This little picture, we've had so much interest in this painting right here. And I have what? I have 5,000 to open immediately. 12,000. I have 12,000, and now 13,000. I have 13,000 I have, and now 14,000. I have 13,000 on the phone, 14,000 with live auctioneers, now 15,000. I have 15,000 with Kayla, 16,000 on live auctioneers, now 17,000. I have 17,000. I knew we had a lot of interest, 18,000 and 19,000. With Emily, it's 19,000. With Kayla, now 20,000 I have, and now 21,000. I have 20,000, now 21,000. 21,000 I have, and 22,000 without hesitation on Emily, and now 23. I have 22,000, now 23,000. At 22,000, now 23,000, this lovely painting. At 22,023. At 22,000 anymore? All in, all done. It's on live auctioneers at 22,000 with Emily. Make no mistake. It's 22,000 once. It's 22,000 twice. 23 with Kayla in time. And 24,000. At 24,000 back with Emily. And now 25,000. At 24,000, now 25,000. So much interest in this piece. At 24,000, now 25,000. At 24,000 on with Emily. You won't find another one. I had 24,000 once. I had 24,000 twice. It's the only one like it. Anyone for 25,000? One more time. They've gone so far. I have 24,000 and 25,000 if you want it. And 24,000 once, 24,000 twice. You're going to lose it. Any more? So, 24,000, Emily.
With the buyer's premium, that work by an artist of rising significance among collectors of botanical art changed hands for $28,800. Rare treasures from the estate of Linda Bean brought impressive bidding action, with a breathtaking 18th century Boston Chippendale Bombay desk, a specimen of outstanding quality, bringing a total of $60,000. A rare Dunlap Queen Anne chest-on-chest sold for $30,000. The legendary Bean collection of New England tall clocks saw vigorous bidder attention, with the top seller an exquisite specimen from the workshop of Brunswick, Maine clockmaker James Carey, realizing a total of $21,600. Historic Americana made an outstanding showing during the auction, with a Revolutionary War powder horn hand-inscribed by Massachusetts soldier Zebulon Vaughn, bringing $57,000. Fine art claimed the spotlight during the concluding day of the Summer Grandeur auction, with pride of place claimed by Andrew Wyeth's gentle watercolor entitled Wishbone, which realized a total of $125,000. Threatening Sky, a vigorous watercolor from the very start of Andrew Wyeth's career as a major figure in American art, brought $106,250. And N.C. Wyeth's monumental depiction of Custer's Last Stand brought $90,000. A vibrant mandala by Maine artist Dalav Ipkar realized $48,000, while an original factory print of Warhol's Marilyn Monroe changed hands for $45,000. The surprise of the day, no pun intended, came when works by Damariscotta outdoors artist and former Disney character designer Maurice Jake Day came to the podium, as each of the paintings hammered down well above estimates.
Jake is doing nothing but going up all the time. And on this right here, love this one here, it's called Nocturne, 1955, and on that right there, Which a Pleasure on this one, the little chipmunks dancing in the night with the owl watching over them. Which a Pleasure on this one, 4,500, we have to open now 5,000. I had 4,750 and 5,000 and I had 5,000 on the floor. I saw her first at 5,000 and 5,500. I had 5,000 on the floor and 5,500. 5,500 here and 6,000. I have 5,500 and now 6,000. I have 5,500 and 6,000 if you like it. At 6,000 with a lady in behind you. I have 6,000 behind you and 6,500. I have 6,000 now 6,500. 6,500 I have and now 7,000. I have 7,000 on the phone with Sylvia and now 7,500. I have 7,000 on the phone with 7,500 Carol and now 8,000. I have 7,500 and now 8,000. 8,000 I have with Sylvia and now 8,500. I have 8,000 now 8,500. I have 8,000 now 8,500. 8,000 8,500 more. 8,500 on the floor right here and now 9,000. I have 8,500 now 9,000 on the phone and now 9,500. I have 9,000 on the phone with Sylvia now 9,500 and 9,000 once. 9,000 twice in for 9,500. 9,500 she's back in and now 10,000. I have 9,500. 10,000 I have with Sylvia and now 11,000. I have 10,000. Thank you for your help, all of you. I have 10,000 now 11,000. I have 10,000 on the phone once, twice in for 11,000. It's on the phone at 10,000, you're away. Jake's having a great day. He should, he's a wonderful artist.
Altogether, 11 lots by this unique Maine artist, including paintings, sketches, and even wood carvings, sold for a combined price, including buyer's premiums, of more than $53,500. A great day for Jake, indeed. And from the forest to the open road, a gleaming colonial white 1956 Ford Thunderbird roars off to its new home at a realized price of $35,000, while a rare left-facing specimen of the famous Mobile Gas Flying Red Horse takes wing for $12,000. All in all, Summer Grandeur 2025 was a grand adventure in auctioneering. This is Auction Waves, and I'm Elizabeth MacLeod. Every object has a history, and the longer that history, the more intriguing the story it can tell. For the objects we bring into our homes and make a part of our daily lives, knowing how they came to be often furnishes a primary element of their appeal. Collecting American country furniture brings you not just substantial, functional pieces that can fit right into your everyday routine, they also connect you directly to 2 centuries of American social history. To learn more about that history, Auction Waves traveled recently to Wiscasset, Maine, where in a cozy 19th century workroom, we took a seat at a centuries-old wooden table with historian, lecturer, and noted collector and dealer Peter Eaton. Peter, welcome to our program, and let's start off, as we like to do, by sketching out some definitions. Americana, American country furniture, is a term you hear a lot in collecting circles, but how exactly should we define it?
Well, country antiques basically are examples of more formal furniture that are made in a more rural tradition with native country woods and painted surfaces usually, and perhaps not with the elegance that some of the more formal things are made. They're not primitive, they're just country versions of more formal things.
Now, does this style go way back in the history of American furniture? Is it something that sort of appeared out of necessity as the colonists arrived, or?
No, country furniture was basically what 95% of the people lived with. There were fewer people who made them, but only the one percenters had formal furniture. Everybody else had, if they had any furniture, they had what we would call country furniture, even though they lived in Boston or Salem or whatever.
People didn't bring a lot of furniture
No.
with them when they came from Europe.
No. Most of them, if they had anything, they brought a trunk, and they had everything that they owned in that trunk. And when they got here, they hoped to either build a place, or they would rent a room in a lodging house, or you're talking, I don't know what time period you're talking, but if you're talking 1620 to 1720, basically that's what it was. It was very simple and very rural, and there might have been 600 people in Lexington and 1,800 people in Boston, and there's not a lot of furniture around.
So you had a lot of people coming over here from Europe who perhaps were skilled artisans in one field or another, and when they came here they had to build out of what they found.
Yes.
And what did they find?
For materials?
Yes.
Well, again, it depends on the time period. If we're talking in the first century that they were here, they used the woods that were available to them, which were, in New England anyway, maple and birch, and a little bit of ash and oak and chestnut. The earlier in the period, the more oak and chestnut got used, and as you got into the 1700s, then they switched largely to maple and birch because it was easier to work. And there were brick kilns that were started right away, so there were being bricks produced everywhere.
So this was all hand-worked wood. Did they have sophisticated tools, or just what they could manufacture, or what they brought with them?
They would have the same tools they had in England. Very primitive, from our perspective, very primitive tools, but they did everything by hand and by sight.
Planes, chisels, saws, things like that.
Yep. Lots of them tried to build by a river so that they could use the water to run a mill to cut the wood. But basically, early on, they just dug a trench, and one guy stood down in the trench and the other guy stood above the trench, and they would just saw back and forth.
Now, these seem to have been very practical pieces. I look at country pieces, and I can see them as being designed for specific purposes. Very form follows function, I guess you would say. Was there an effort to build to an aesthetic design, or were they just trying to be practical?
No. For the first century anyway, they were primarily building furniture that they could use, that was functional, that was practical, that was reasonably long-lasting, but except for the one percenters, they were not trying to put any style. There was no aesthetic that they were striving for, other than functionality. And again, we're talking about New England and not New York and not Pennsylvania or the South, because it was different there.
Were there any vernacular styles in European furniture that they might have remembered from their homeland and brought with them, perhaps?
Yeah, particularly in Massachusetts, the first furniture forms were derivatives of what they had known in England, and the first chairs and the first chests were essentially copies of what they knew from England or Holland, where so many of them had come from as well. They were traditional forms and using what they had available for wood here, but they were not inventing the wheel.
How long would you think that it took for a local American furniture industry to develop out of these early artisans?
By the 1720s, there was a very active and prolific chair manufacturing group in Boston, making different types of chairs that they were exporting throughout the colonies. But probably before 1710 or so, you might have 2 or 3 guys working, in building like this, but you didn't have anything on a larger scale than that.
And the people that were using this furniture were still primarily building it themselves, rather than buying it from a dealer.
Yeah, but the Boston furniture industry making chairs, they were making them for sale. Mm-hmm. They weren't just making them for themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
But the more rural, working class type furniture buyers were still mostly making their own.
Yes.
When did they move toward buying rather than making, would you say?
I would say most people in the country were not. They were trying to make a a living out of rough soil and tough conditions and sickness and disease and one thing and another, and they weren't really looking to buy anything. They would, if anything, they would be bartering back and forth. If one guy was a brick mason, he might trade his bricks for another guy who was a lumbersmith. So it would go back and forth like that. But they weren't actively looking to buy anything because they didn't have any money.
It wasn't a mercantile society yet.
No.
How were these pieces used and maintained by their original owners? We see them when they come down to us today. They have very honest marks of wear on them, but they've clearly been maintained. Did every home have a workshop where...
No. If there were a household, it would probably a 3-room house, and they had a bed and a chest of drawers and a plank table and a couple of chairs, and that would be what they had. Anything that survived from that period is therefore pretty valuable today, because unless it was a wealthy family that was keeping it generation after generation, once it had gotten broken or abused, it became firewood for the overnight fire.
So we're talking about a very consumable product here rather than a product that was intended for durability.
No, it was both. It was consumable, but they did not have extra money, if any money, so they were certainly concerned that the stuff was well made and would last.
What would you say were the essential items of furniture for the average householder? You mentioned chests and beds and tables. Were there other items that were seen as essential?
No, from what they've been able to find from the early excavations and what's been left with any kind of documentation in the 17th and the very early 18th century, other than a chest, a lift-top chest, or a chest with 1 or 2 drawers, maybe one imposing chair for the head of the household, and a couple of benches or stools, and a bedstead. And the bedstead was the focal point of the house, and throw as many quilts as you could on it, and hopefully, if you had any money, you could wrap bed hangings around it to stay warm. There wasn't a lot.
I like that description, because so often you think of the ornate bed with the draperies and all of the canopies and all of the decorations. That was practical. That had a reason for existing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if you're heated in a house heated with a little wood stove or a little coal stove, you're going to be very cold when the morning comes around.
I mean, this is pretty much what they live with. It's like this.
And we're sitting in what would be considered today to be a shed with plank walls, plank floors.
Yep.
Not uncomfortable, but very Spartan, which I guess would describe the way that the houses were as well. Did they build with an eye toward portability? I had a sense that they moved around a lot.
I would say that obviously the average family back then had 8 to 10 to 12 kids. So as the kids got to an age where they could either be sent off to work as an apprentice for somebody else, or they would be at home, and if they could eventually get off and get on their own and buy a few acres out in central Mass or whatever, they didn't really move a lot.
You kind of stayed close to where they settled.
Well, yeah, I mean, the further you move, the more opportunities there were to run into indigenous people.
So there really wasn't a need to use building techniques that allowed for easy disassembly.
No.
So everything was very firmly constructed. What sort of carpentry, cabinet-making techniques did they use?
Again, in New England, up until 1820 or 30, buildings that were made were all post and beam. And so there were a post and beam and pins holding the joints together. Furniture was largely what they had learned or what they had seen at home, which was mortise and tenon joints in the drawers.
And most of the metal pieces had to be imported from England.
Well, the Saugus Ironworks started, I think, in 1650s or 60s, I guess. So there were things, kettles and fireplace equipment and andirons that were being made in Saugus, just outside of Boston, in the 1650s, 60s, 70s. So, but anything of any design was not really being made. In terms of houses and furniture, there was not much embellishment at all until the early 18th century. And again, that was sort of limited to the people who had the money. I mean, they did what they could with the houses, but basically they were, they were post and beam, and if there might be a sheathed wall or a couple of sheathed walls, and as you got into the 1730s and 40s, if you were close to a center of cabinet making, you might have raised panel walls, something like that. And that's the way it went into the 18th century.
What did they do for finishing on the furniture? We see them so often today encased in paint. Was that original to that period, or was that something that was embellished on as the furniture came down to us?
Most of the furniture that was made in New England, again, in the 1640 or 50 to 1700, most of it was painted colors. They wanted bright colors to liven up the day, and historically they found that some of the chests that had been covered with paint, if they cleaned some of the paint off, there's yellows and oranges and blues and greens, and there's a great chest at Shelburne that's and then there's one at the MFA that are all carved, and you'd think that they were all sort of one color, but they weren't. They were multicolored, and sometimes they had decoration, and that's, if you can find one that's a piece of furniture that's been painted multiple times and somebody competent can clean it off, then you might be able to save the original decoration that was there. But they weren't, it wasn't the dark, bleak picture that we have of the...
It wasn't a cold brown world.
No.
They were mixing all these paints on the spot. What did they use for pigments?
Herbs primarily. They used iron ore, but after that, primarily it was herbs that gave the different colors, and they had learned that wherever they might have been. They'd learned which herbs to mix to get the colors that they wanted.
They might have picked some of that up from the Native Americans.
Could have, yeah.
Now, this furniture has knocked around for a long time. A piece that was built in the early 18th century probably went through many, many owners before it came down to us. And that there had to have come a point where it stopped being just an old chest, just an old bureau, just an old table, and became something that you thought about its history. When did country furniture become collectible? So I look at old antique collectors' manuals from the turn of the 20th century, and they're very concerned with fine furniture, the finer things. I don't see a lot of discussion of the sort of everyday furniture that people seem to be interested in today.
No, there's very, very little interest in that until probably the 1920s, when American artists began to see some value in it, and they saw the value as sort of folk art. And then you sort of went from folk art into collecting the furniture that had that same appeal or aesthetic. And a lot of that started down in southern Maine, in the artist colony.
Algonquin,
yeah. The artists from the city came up and spent summers or whatever. And that's when there was an interest in collecting rural things. I mean, it obviously had always existed. Nutting's book, Furniture Treasury, was written, I think, in 1918 or 1919, and there's thousands of pictures of country furniture, so to speak, in there, but almost none of them retain any kind of original surface or condition, because that wasn't the way. In fact, when antiques became a profession and people started collecting early American stuff, generally speaking, the first thing they did, if it were a case piece, was to take it apart, knock it all apart, strip it totally inside and out, and put it back together with new pins so that it would be sturdy and ready to go. And this was large. This was a huge industry. Well, huge is relative, but this was an industry done in Connecticut where this all started. Irving Lyon and some of the other guys who wrote the 2 or 3 early books on furniture were the worst culprits for let's make it like it looked. But it didn't look like that originally.
So we've developed sort of a synthesized idea of what this furniture should look like. So you have people doing restorations, so-called, to a state that didn't actually exist.
In a lot of the stuff, yeah. And it really wasn't until the first big gift to the Met was in Mrs. Blair in 1912, and she gave a lot of early furniture to the Met to get their collection off the ground. And there was some painted stuff, or some old surface stuff there. I mean, there always were a few people who recognized that things should be kind of left as is. But in terms of what we've seen, and what I've seen in the last 50 years anyway, the impetus to collect furniture that hadn't been stripped or restored is something that just came in the 60s. I mean, one of my best sources for country furniture in the 1970s was a guy in the next town over to me. They had a dipping tank, and they would just, whatever the piece of furniture was, they would dip it in the tank and they'd scrub it with brushes and totally strip it down. And I would try to, I'd go over there every week and I'd say, "No, Sam," I said, "I can pay you this for the way it is." "Oh, why do you want to look, you know?" And I'd say, "No, I like it like that." He said, "No," he said, "my customers don't like that. They want it pretty." And I said, "Well, I can probably pay you more as is than, you know, you can get for it afterwards." And his wife's, they had a very, very successful antiques business, but it was a decorating business. And his wife told me any number of times, "You're never going to make it if you have to get over $100 for anything." I said, "Well, thanks, Betty, but..."
It's only original once.
That's true. It's only original once. Although there have been several guys around who can make it original again.
So let's talk about mindful restoration of these items. Obviously, you don't want to go with a can of house paint and a brush and just slap a coat of paint on something. What is a sensitive, historically respectful way to restore, say, a table that's all scuffed up and bumped around that you want to be able to use in your home?
I think that, this
table here.
Yeah, this is Chinese, but this is probably 300 years old. And I mean, anything that anybody did to that or these chairs at this point would take away from their value. You might clean the dust or something like that off the top, but you wouldn't do anything if you liked this kind of stuff, whether it's Chinese or American or whatever. If you liked original surface and original condition, then you had to learn first what original surface was back then, and you had to learn what condition meant back then. And then you had to go through a couple hundred years of changes to see what might have happened to that piece over that period of time. And now you have people who are incredibly creative in terms of making the pieces look like they did back then. But generally speaking, in terms of the business that I'm known for, if it's got restoration of something that's part of the piece somewhere else, so that you know that restoration is accurate,
right,
and the restoration has been properly done.
And you would want to have somebody knowledgeable in the construction of this furniture to do structural repairs on it, rather than just going at it with a tack hammer.
Right, and there's less and less authentic stuff left.
It's a finite supply.
There's a finite supply. I go for my walk around Wiscasset in the afternoons, and yesterday I walked by a house 3 blocks from here, and it'd been a dumpster out front, beautiful end chimney, 1780, 1790 colonial, and but I could see the windows were open and there was nobody there. So I stopped in my walk and I went across the street and I looked through the window. Somebody has stripped everything out of the house except the chimney. That's all that's left. You can look from the front of the house to the back of the house, and all you see is studs. So the room, walls, the floors, everything else is gone. So, why do you buy an old colonial if that's what you're going to do to it? But there are people out there. I mean, I emailed another guy who cares about this stuff, and I said, another one bites the dust. Once you do that, it's done.
There's no going
undo
back.
it. No. And it's the same with furniture. I looked at a chair at an auction last night, and there were 3 different centuries in the same chair that people had added things to think that they were embellishing it, when in fact, they were not. So,
and yet all of those things become a part of the history of that chair.
They do, and if if people care about that stuff, then they're going to buy it. But it's like all the furniture that Wallace Notting made in the 1930s. It was copies of 17th century stuff, but he sort of refigured them a little bit to make them a little more robust, and everything was stripped and just.
Over the years, you've seen a lot of trends, I'm sure, in the antiques market. What pieces are more popular now than were 50 years ago?
Well, the more decorative things are now more valuable. Decoys I wished I'd specialized in decoys and weather vanes, because those things have held their value. I think that almost everything is at a fraction of what it might have been 30 years ago. It's a great time to buy stuff. I mean, as long as you know what you're doing, it's a great time to buy stuff.
There's an old saying, collect what you love and love what you collect. And it's longtime collector dealers like Peter Eaton who fill an important role in preserving these fascinating historic pieces for us today and for the generations to come. And when the time comes for important collections to pass on to a new generation, it is a notable occasion. Our upcoming auction of the Americana collection of Jean and Larry Dubord of Farmington is a significant event for collectors and enthusiasts of Americana, bringing to the auction block pieces carefully selected and personally curated by these two notable collectors, who not only made these beautiful items their business for so many years, but also their personal passion. From practical, substantial specimens of honest American woodworking and cabinet-making expertise to unique and distinctive items of decor, our September 19th Americana auction has something you'll be proud to own, proud to use, proud to display in your own home. Be sure to see the full catalog at thomastonauction.com. And there's my ride, but before I sail, just a reminder that previews for our upcoming Americana auction begin at the galleries in Thomaston, Maine on September 16th. We'll all be looking for you there, so be sure to stop by and say hello. T-Shree Dobson is at the piano, David Allen interacts with the guitar, and the program is produced, written, and edited for you by yours truly, Elizabeth McLeod, who wishes you smooth sailing and happy bidding for Auction Waves. Auction Waves is an exclusive audio presentation of Thomaston Place Auction Galleries in Thomaston, Maine.